Anxiety is a strange thing because it is both a clinical necessity, so we need it because it's the thing that protects us from threat and danger. It's the thing that says, I'm worried about that knocking in the car. Should I get that sorted? Or this relationship feels a little odd and wrong. Do I need to pay attention to it? Or my child doesn't look that well and she's been off sorts for the past couple of days. Should I take her to the doctor? It felt much safer to stay inside. Of course it did, and we were told we had to anyway. But I think what happened is we stopped having those, we stopped testing our expectations, we stopped testing our assumptions, and perhaps we fell into withdrawing and isolation because it felt safer. And my feeling is none of us know whether we're going to be any good at it. And it doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the curiosity to try. I don't want to reveal myself again. Because if I reveal myself again, I'm going to get hurt again. If I show my vulnerability, if I show who I am, I'll be rejected and hurt, and I never want to go back to that place again. The curiosity about what's going on with you, the connection with other people, and the compassion. Learning to reach for it and to ask for it, but also learning how to show it to yourself.
Hello and welcome to How to Have Extraordinary Relationships podcast with me, Lucy Cavendish, journalist, 10 counsellor, as everyone knows, and I am really honoured and thrilled to be here with Dr. Sian Williams, who many of you may well know from seeing her on television for many, many years, on the BBC and many other areas, and she retrained as a counsellor, more than a counsellor, because she's a doctor and working in the NHS and doing lots of amazingly good work as a therapist. She's written a book which I think is brilliant. It's called The Power of Anxiety: How to Ride the Worry Wave. So anyone here who's suffering from anxiety or knows anyone, we're going to really dig into that in this podcast. And now I think the book is so unbelievably helpful. So thank you so much, Sian, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for a really generous introduction as well. I really appreciate it. But my daughter reminds me of the reason I wrote this book, which is if you can put some learning in there that will help people who are living with anxiety and have spent a lifetime fighting with, struggling with, trying to get rid of, running away from, withdrawing, avoiding, all these things with anxiety, if it can help someone in that position, then it's going to all be worth it. So that was the reason for doing it, really. And yeah, based on personal experience, but also clinical experience, which I know you'll know well.
Well, so there's so many questions I want to ask you, but so one... So I know a lot of my clients are anxious. My daughter, who'd be more than happy for me to talk about this because she's very, really wants to get out there. She has anxiety, herself, and she's nearly 19. And a lot of people I know with anxiety talk about it as if it's a sort of a disease or it's a thing you can't get rid of, or it's just like I don't know. I can't think of the same thing. What would be an equivalent? But it's when she says I have anxiety, I would say I'm not sure if that's the terminology. How do you do we have it, or is it something that creeps up on us? What do you feel? Are we born anxious? Is the question I'm trying to ask.
We live with anxiety. Anxiety is a strange thing because it is both a clinical necessity. So we need it because it's the thing that protects us from threat and danger. It's the thing that says, I'm worried about that knocking in the car. Should I get that sorted? Or this relationship feels a little odd and wrong. Do I need to pay attention to it? Or my child doesn't look that well and she's been off sorts for the past couple of days. Should I take her to the doctor? That's the anxiety you pay attention to, because that's going, hang on. There's something here needs sorting.
Yes.
And we need that. We do not want to get rid of that. But it's when anxiety has too much power over us and seems to be getting in the way of everyday life. That's when we need to pay attention to it and say, does it have too much power in my life here? And is it making wrong assumptions, wrong judgments based on, might be an old script from our past, might be being reminded or feeling like we're worthless, or we need to people please, or we need to be something in order to placate somebody. There can be a whole host of reasons why our self-critical voice misreads the room and is not telling us things that are helpful, but is telling us things that are harmful. And as I say, that can come from childhood, it can come from a traumatic experience, it can come from a whole host of different places. But that's when we need to look at it a little bit differently. And it takes quite a while, but it's about understanding our reaction to anxiety, noticing the anxiety, naming it. I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of or frightened of, but it can feel like a monster, which is on the other end of a rope in a tug of war, and it is pulling you into a hole. And we need to learn to drop the rope, to say, you know what, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. You're trying to alert me to danger or threat. Does that danger and threat exist now? If it does, I pay attention to it and do it. If it doesn't, what can I do in this instance to manage all this difficult stuff? Because we know anxiety isn't just in the head. It's held in the body.
Yes.
It really is. The body keeps the score, as Bessel van der Kolk told us. We feel stuff inside when anxiety has the power, and then it shows up in our behavior. When something feels like it's a really anxiety-inducing scenario, like, for example, going out, social anxiety. And a lot of us experienced this during the pandemic. We lost our social muscle. We lost the ability to have sometimes difficult and complex conversations with other people. And it felt much safer to stay inside. Of course it did. And we were told we had to anyway. But I think what happened is we stopped having those, we stopped testing our expectations. We stopped testing our assumptions. And perhaps we fell into withdrawing and isolation because it felt safer. And temporarily, it always does. You'll know, I'm sure, Lucy, if there's somewhere that you feel that's been in the diary, you know that you've got to go. You're really not looking forward to going for whatever kind of reason. Anxiety might be stirring up in you. Does this happen? Anxiety might be stirring up in you.
I have to say, anxiety isn't one of my biggest things, but yes, because but that's because I've done a lot of therapeutic work.
Yes, well, indeed. And you have to do the work in order to know what to do when it shows up, I think. And that's what the book's about. But then just noticing that and being kind to it and acknowledging it and going, okay, well, you think that something's going to happen at this event. Maybe you will show yourself up or not be interesting enough or clever enough or sparkly enough or might not have the right thing to wear or whatever it is, or might be just launched into a really uncomfortable conversation. That can bring up all these feelings of anxiety, and it's hard to know what to do with them. So the safest, quickest option is I just won't go out.
Yes.
And that is a short-term benefit because, of course, those anxious feelings may subside. But what happens in the long term is you're not testing your own assumptions of what's going to happen when you go out. And if you're not testing them, then you can't prove them wrong. And then you sometimes can start beating yourself up for not going out. And then what did I miss out on? And then it makes it harder to go out the next time because you've developed a habit of withdrawal and isolation. So all these things can give anxiety more power than it needs and should have.
It has huge power over people, anxiety. I mean, I've known people sort of throw up, literally retch until the point of dry retching because they have to go to a party or they've got to make a speech. It's absolute, and their brain is going, but you know what you're talking about, but the body,
I know,
it's in total trauma.
Yeah, you're right. And we know, don't we, that when we are in a high threat state, which any presentation that we're doing, anything where we're doing something in front of colleagues, if it is a presentation, is going to make us anxious. Of course it is. That's understandable. It's an understandable reaction to appearing in front of our peers, just to take presentation as an example. But what happens if we've done something in the past and it's not gone well? What happens if our brain is going to an imagined future where we're messing up and not getting things right? So we're either in the past or in the future, but we're not existing in the present. And so what our brain does is go, whack, 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 threat alert, threat alert. And that stimulates all these sort of hormones, our adrenaline, our cortisol level goes up. our body responds to that threat because it's in fight, flight, freeze. Well, I just need to get out, or I'm
Mm.
going to faint, or I'll freeze. So it has all these reactions. And because when that's happening, and our amygdala or amygdalae, which are these little things, little organs at the base of the brain stem, and they're partly responsible for picking up threat and danger. But if they are very loud and going off, then the other bits of the brain that are responsible for planning and context and you know what, you've done this before, it'll be okay, and just take a breath and be in the present. You can't hear any of that. You can only hear the alarm bell going off, and your body can only feel the fight, flight, freeze reaction. And your behavior is, well, I'll just shut down then, or won't be able to speak, or your voice gets very tight, or you can feel your heart racing and you think you're going to faint. And I think the first step, the very first step in changing our relationship with anxiety is noticing that, is noticing what's coming up for us in anxious situations and knowing that it's not our fault, that anxiety is there to keep us safe. It's just sometimes it gets it wrong.
Because what you're talking about in the book, which I really like, which is that I know there's lots of bits in, there's lots of exercises, lots of tools and techniques, is this sense of like, okay, so how are you going to recognize you're anxious, recognize potentially you're highly sensitive, and how are you going to embrace it in a way, I think is what you're saying,
Yeah.
rather than seeing it as such a negative thing.
Yes. Part of embracing it is about sensitivity, I feel, because there's a big part of the book which is about recognizing that those who are often the most highly anxious are also the most highly sensitive people.
Mm.
And they are open to more of the stuff that the world throws at them. So they're more receptive to stimuli. And that's, we're looking at one another, Lucy, and I'm looking at your face. And how does she feel about me? What does she think about me? We're trying to intuit emotion and feeling and reaction and all those things. And sometimes we're getting it wrong. Is this rejection? Is this frustration? Is this boredom? Yet highly sensitive people can overinterpret reactions too, but they are very receptive to that emotional intensity of themselves and other people, and noise and light and music and art and nature and the good things and the bad things. But the negative tend to relate to anxiety and depression with highly sensitive people. They're more receptive to anxiety and depression. Equally, in the right environment, they are the ones that thrive. They are the ones that are excellent, compassionate leaders. So it's right. Well, how do we get from this state then, where we're anxious and low, to this state then, when we're caring and compassionate and empathic and intuitive and adaptive and creative and all the wonderful things that highly sensitive people can be? And part of that is by, and there's a quiz in the book, I don't know whether you've done it, about are you a highly sensitive person? Can I ask, Lucy? Are you not? Okay, you're one of the dandelions of the world.
I mean, yes, in bits. I'm highly sensitive to art, music, emotions. Okay, but I'm not
because
a
it separates it out.
Yeah, separates it out, which is brilliant. I'm not a perfectionist.
Yes.
So I like the fact it separates it out. I'm sensitive to nature, to blah blah blah. But other bits, I'm quite robust.
Yes. And as you said, you've had to do a lot of work on yourself because that's what you need to do as a therapist. It's about understanding ourselves so that we don't bring ourselves into the room when we're sitting opposite clients. So the test, it looks at different areas of sensitivity. And yes, it's is it nature? Is it art and music? Is it emotional reactivity? So how am I reacting to you? How are you reacting to me? 30% of the population are highly sensitive people, and they're what I call the orchids in the world. And 30% are the dandelions. The rest are the tulips. And this comes from a theory from W. Thomas Boyce, which you may know, a pediatrician who divided children into dandelion and orchids based on a Swedish concept that he heard about. And he said, there are these dandelions that are all sort of perky and yellow and come up through the cracks in the pavement and are resilient and hardy. And then there are your orchids who are magnificent in the right circumstances. In the wrong environment, they're not going to thrive. How do we create the right environment for them? Because they will be. There are so many good, compassionate, empathic leaders who are highly sensitive people. Just think of Jacinda Ardern, who was the former New Zealand Prime Minister, how she reacted to COVID, how she reacted to the Christchurch attacks. We can be great teachers, healthcare workers, therapists. This is often what highly sensitive people go into. But
Yes.
equally, what they might do if that environment isn't right for them is they can overwork, they can burn out, they can become exhausted and fatigued, they can give more than they get. They can feel resentful because they're the ones who stay late and give everything to the job or to their friends, and perhaps they're not receiving the same amount back. So that is why it's important to recognize, am I that kind of person? And is this why anxiety is showing up for me? And if it is, what do I do with it? How can I help myself?
Yes, because a lot of, I mean, what I notice with people who are anxious, and in the bits of all of us, if I'm going to do a talk, there's always one who thinks, why did I agree to do it?
Yes.
Why didn't I just stay at home and just have a cup of tea? Right.
So much easier.
Yeah, so much. Like, why have I done it? Um, Hang on, where was I going? So anxiety can really stop us from doing things that part of us would like to do, because we're not just one thing, are we? We're
No,
not
of
just
course.
anxious, we're also all the other bits to
Of
us that.
course we are. Yeah, we contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman said. It's important to recognize our complexity, that anxiety isn't us. Anxiety isn't who we are.
Mm.
It's a part of who we are. It might be part of our past experience. It's probably always going to be there somewhere in the future because, as I say, it's a clinical necessity. We're going to need it at some point. How then can we use it in a more positive way? And there's a guy in the book, a drummer from the band Radiohead.
Yes, yes, he's
Feldman.
very anxious. Yes.
Well, I was really interested in him because I met him about 15 years ago, and he struck me as a very thoughtful man who was doing a job in front of hundreds of thousands of people on a regular basis. And I thought, how is this sort of thoughtful, perhaps rather introverted guy managing the stuff that comes up if it does? And when we spoke, he talked about anxiety coming in 1993, which is when the band Radiohead really came onto the scene. Before that, they were a band playing in Oxford pubs, and then all of a sudden they're in big stadia all over the world. And Philip was a brilliant drummer and he loved drumming. And when he was a kid, he loved drumming. It was just something that he could do. And then suddenly he's on a stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and almost as though his legs aren't connecting with the instrument. And his first thoughts are, I'm writing myself out of the script here. I'm getting stuff wrong. Everybody can hear it. He says the gremlins take over. The gremlins were taking over. And that lasted for him a year, which must have been a profoundly uncomfortable year for him in 1993. And I went to see them last year, Radiohead, because they were back. And there he was, and I took my daughter, and it was magical. And I was thinking about him as he was performing. He is a brilliant drummer, and how he has learned to fuel his performance when he sees that anxiety coming up. So rather than thinking, this is terrifying, this is the end of my career, I'm going to let everybody down, I'm going to let my teammates, I'm going to let my bandmates down, he thinks to himself, okay, well, this isn't the first time I've done this. I have a backlog of good experiences. This might not be perfect, but I'm with the people I trust. Everybody here has come to have a good time. Let's just throw the energy that comes from this anxiety into the performance to fuel what I'm doing on stage. And that is how he kind of took the power back from his anxiety and used it for what he was doing, used it for that performance. So I think it's reframing the stuff that
Yes.
comes up for you, but noticing it first. You've got to notice, oh, that's interesting. Here we go again. We've been here before. What's
Yes.
this knot in my stomach before I talk to Lucy? Why is my heart beating a little bit faster? Well, it's because I'm speaking to somebody new and I don't know what she's going to ask me. Okay, we've been here before. We can do this. So whenever that stuff comes up, it is about showing a bit of kindness to the things that come up, thanking your anxiety for doing this for you, for keeping you on alert and on your toes, and then working with it. I think that's the key, because it's not enough to just think in anxiety, because as I say, it's not just a thinking thing, it's a feeling thing and a doing thing. So how do you think and feel and act with anxiety?
There's a 3 parts to it.
It's a three-part system. Yeah,
How
very
do
much
you
so.
think? How do you feel? How do you act?
Mm. And what do you act with? Because another thing is, I mean, there are lots of things you can do, and there are lots of exercises in the book, but
Yes.
there'll be grounding exercises, which are good in panic, and breathing exercise to stimulate our parasympathetic system. And before that, there are exercises which help you understand a bit more about your own personal anxiety, where it comes from, whether it does come from perfectionism, a strong self-critical voice, whether it comes from attachments in your past, all those sorts of things. But then once you've noticed where it's come from, once you notice what the thoughts are saying, and thank your thoughts for doing that, but perhaps tell them to go to the back of the bus for a while. Once you've felt where it's coming up in your body and softened and smoothed those edges, it's about doing something with it. It's about acting. How are you going to act? And one of the things I think is really important is knowing what you stand for, knowing what you would like to be remembered for, knowing your, if not the purpose in your life, because it's hard for people to say, my purpose in life is this, knowing what your values are. So when everything else falls away, what do you stand for? Away from goals, away from achievements, away from success, away from all that, what do you want to be known for? So I'm asking that to you now, I think.
Okay. You see, my brain goes to known by who? What do I
Um,
want to be known by?
known by yourself, I guess. If
Yes.
looking back on yourself.
Yes, because I'm thinking, well, what?
It's not about expectations and judgments, this. It's about knowing what it is that's within you that makes you feel like you are living the life that has authenticity and integrity. So when you take it, when you strip everything else back, what are the few things you hold on to that are integral to who Lucy Cavendish is?
I know that I'm a good person
Hmm.
trying to do good things to the best of my ability.
Yeah. So if you were to have, and I've done this with police officers, and I work in the NHS with
Mm,
emergency services. So I work a lot with police officers, and I
mm.
work with journalists as well. And there's a lot of skepticism when we first do values.
Right, that's interesting.
Because it seems a little bit sort of wishy-washy, and why do you do what you, well, I do what I do because it's my job, and therefore you can't talk about the emotions that come up in your job, because if you do that, maybe you're weak, or the job isn't about you, it's about helping other people, and therefore you can't feel the difficult emotions you feel. A lot of teachers feel this, a lot of healthcare workers feel this, a lot of
Mm,
emergency responders, a lot of the helpers feel, I don't deserve to feel these emotions because my job is to help other people.
mm,
And so there can be a degree of, values, not sure about that. And then when you go into it, and there's a values list in the book, or 100 common
mm.
values, and you sort of find yourself ticking all of them. Yeah, yeah, I've got all of that. I want all of that. But then when you boil it down, and there are questions which help you boil it down, when you boil it down to a few key ones, they're the ones that you will always stand by. Like you just said, which is you try to be a good person doing good for other people. In the best, I can't remember the last bit of your phrase,
To the
Lucy.
best of my ability.
To the best of your ability. So when stuff comes up, when difficult decisions come up, or when really complex, hard, challenging emotions come up, going back to that, which is the essence of who you are, can help you through that, can
Mm.
help you act. Okay, well, what do I do here in this circumstance where I'm doing the best that I possibly can do to help myself and to help other people? What can I do? And that will help inform your decisions. That will help inform the actions that you take. So I think values exercises are really important.
Yeah.
But when I say what do you want to be known by, it's not that I'm thinking of the expectations and judgments of other people, because you'll know, because you've read the book, there's a big section on people pleasing. I think a
Yeah,
lot of people
yeah.
grow up to be people pleasers
Yes,
because,
absolutely.
yeah, because it's like, well, if I haven't felt valued, and if nobody said you're worth something because of, not because of the stuff you achieve, not because of exam results, or not because of, you are valued and you matter. And I don't want you to be quiet. And if you've got emotions, you can express them. It's okay. If you're angry, you can say, you don't have to not be angry or not be emotional, which I think a lot of women, especially of a certain age, we're
Mm.
told that we don't talk about our emotions. We get up and we get on, and we are doers and problem solvers.
Yes, I
And
call that over resilience.
over resilience,
Over,
yeah.
yeah, resilience good, but over resilience not so
Yeah.
good. But
Yeah.
don't mind me. I've got, I'll just carry. It's like I'll just carry on. Don't mind me.
Yes.
Just off we
Yes.
go.
Off we go.
Once more to the breach. To the
Exactly.
detriment of yourself. To the detriment of
Exactly.
yourself.
And so often actually with the clients that I talk to who have self-silenced, in other words, they felt anger or conflict and they haven't been able to show it or express it. And so instead of doing that, they just keep it small and keep
Mhm.
themselves small, and are, who is it you want me to be? Because I can be that person. You tell me what you want me to be, and I can be that person. And they've been doing it for so long, they forget what it is. They forget who they are. They
Yeah.
forget what it is that they want. They forget to say, you know what, that's not right. Or when they're asked a question, what do you want to do? Rather than saying, I don't know, what do you want to do? Which so many of us say for so long, especially if we've got children, I don't know, but a lot of us will grow up saying, not knowing what our opinion is
Yes.
and suppressing all this difficult stuff. And it makes us ill. It impacts our
Yes,
immune
it does.
system. And
It
that's what
does.
all the research in the book says. If you self-silence, it will make you ill. So it's, how do we do that in a safe way? Because maybe we haven't been taught how to manage our emotions safely. Maybe we haven't been taught how to self-soothe, how to look after ourselves.
Mm.
We might have been taught the threat system and the drive system, which is, yes, motivate yourself and drive towards success. The threat system, because if you don't, what'll happen? You'll lose your job, or you won't get to the place you want to, or you won't be this, or you won't be that.
Mm.
But we're not taught how to soothe. And if that bit of the system isn't working along with the other systems, threat, drive, and soothe have to work together. You need a bit of threat, you need a bit of drive, but you certainly need soothe. Otherwise, we are out of kilter.
So people pleasing is so it is around, isn't it? If I please people, I'll be loved. They'll like me. Everyone will like me. And
Yeah,
if
I've
I
got
don't,
words.
yeah,
Mm,
and if I kind of whatever, don't people please, or however that may look, let's say self-actualize. I mean, I know it's maybe an annoying psychotherapy word for people, but if I actually am being me, what if people don't like me? I think,
yeah,
so there's an anxiety. What if no one likes me? What if I end up with, no friends? What if I never have a
yeah.
partner? What if I end up being ostracized? I think it comes a lot from there, doesn't it? People pleasing. I must make everyone okay.
Yeah, I must make everyone okay, and I must be likable. And the way of being likable is to be what you want me to be.
Yes.
And to be quiet, and to not show my real feelings or complex and difficult feelings, because if I do, I don't know, you'll be bored or you'll reject me. And sometimes that does come from a previous experience of
Mm.
being rejected, of showing up and being yourself, and having somebody say, you know what, no, I don't want that. Or that's too much. You're too much. Or
Yes.
or stop showing off.
Yes, I had that a lot when I was a child.
What, stop showing off?
Yeah, I am an inveterate born show off.
And what does that do to you? Stop showing off. When
Yeah. Why do you have to be you? I mean, my mother, bless her, why do you have to be so you? I mean, now it is wonderful to be you. Be more you.
I know. It's just, I mean, I
You're
remember
too
one of my
much.
clients coming to me and she was saying, everybody tells me I'm just too much. How can I be less of this? And it's, oh no. How can somebody be too much? It's just, I just think we silence ourselves and are silenced and are made to feel that we don't matter and who we are is somehow worthy of rejection, not worthy of love.
Mm.
And it's confusing because, okay, well, what do I need to be then in order to matter, in order to have value, in order to be loved? And I think if you have also been in had an experience where worth is based on achievement and success, that drives perfectionism because you think your worth is determined by exam results or scores on a sheet or stuff that you do rather than who you are.
Yes.
And wouldn't it be great if the next generation grows up with an understanding that they matter and they have worth irrespective of what they achieve and
Mm.
their test results or exam results?
Yes. I
Because
think
that was certainly the way of measuring worth when I was
yeah,
growing up.
absolutely. I mean, you've achieved a lot. In the book, you tell the story of when you are standing up and you're reporting and you just go, you faint.
Yes.
And Nicholas Witchell steps in, doesn't he?
I tell you for why. So it was 2004 and it was a royal event and I was covering it for the BBC. And I was in a marquee and on a very high stool. Now I'm 5'2", and I have to say that TV furniture is not designed for the small woman. And that is one of the things that was not designed for the small woman. And I was sitting on a very high stool. It was a very hot day. I was waiting a long time to go on air. And then my job was to hold the whole thing together, was to hold the show together. And that involved commentating on pictures that I could see on a TV screen at my feet. So the pictures were being fed to the director who was feeding them to me. And then as I was commentating, all of a sudden the pictures dropped and it was a blank screen. But because I was the only one commentating and I was holding it all together, I had to keep talking. And for some reason, the hot day, the high stool,
Mm.
a lack of breakfast, all these things where perhaps you're not looking after yourself in the way that you should. I fainted, I fell off the stool. Producer came up, gave me a couple of biscuits, got ate the biscuits, got back onto the stool and carried on. But in the meantime, the director, who could obviously see me on a feed, I mean, luckily the viewers couldn't see me. They could see the pictures. I just couldn't. So yeah, the director just shouted to Nick and said, Phil, Phil, Phil. And I spoke to Nick, our raw correspondent. I spoke to him recently and he said, I had no idea. And actually, nobody had any idea that it had happened, which is what you want as a broadcaster if something goes wrong. You don't want the audience to be thinking, oh, hang on. Sometimes they like it. Sometimes they think, oh, I quite like a bit of jeopardy. What's going to happen now? But you don't want to be the one. You don't want to be the one that's presenting in that circumstance. So, it was all right in the end. And that was just it was a small example of how, in the most innocuous of instances, things can be overwhelming enough for your body to react in a way that's not helpful. And so it's okay. Well, thinking back on that, and I hadn't been presenting for very long, and I presented for a further sort of 20 odd years. But okay, so the next time you go out, you think, right, well, I'm going to have a decent breakfast. I'm going to make sure that I'm not sitting on a very high stool where my feet don't touch the ground. I'm going to make sure that we're not there for hours on end before anything happens. I'm going to make sure that, you just sort of protect yourself a little bit more on the next occasion. But yeah, it was just an example of how it can happen to all of us, really. You don't need to be, I mean, I haven't lived a life which has been dominated by anxiety because otherwise I couldn't have done the job. You
Yes.
can't do radio and television for 35 years if you are absolutely overwhelmed with anxiety. It just doesn't, stress and anxiety doesn't work. You learn to use the bits of it that can fuel your performance, but not let it overwhelm you. I mean, the people I work with, I'm sure the people you work with, it's often got to the stage by the time they come and see me, certainly in the NHS, because sometimes they've had to wait quite a while, where things are impacting their relationships, their everyday life, their work. Sometimes they're signed off sick, and they have awful feelings of shame and frustration. And of course, we know that shame and blame exacerbates things like post-traumatic stress disorder. I wrote a couple of academic papers on this, which is PTSD and what happens when shame and blame are put in the mix, which is I shouldn't have these feelings, or everybody thinks this of me. And it can make it a lot longer lasting and a lot more entrenched and a lot more difficult to work with, actually. And so we need to catch people upstream. And this is why it's important to, for you to do this podcast, for me to write about it, is just so that people can understand their own emotional reactions and think, how then can I look after myself? Because it might be a while before I sit in front of a therapist. Or I don't want it to get to the stage where it's negatively impacting my life to such an extent that I can't be me, that I don't feel that I'm living the life that I could be. And so if we do proactive, preventative stuff earlier on and know ourselves a bit better, forgive ourselves a little more, bring self-compassion in, which is so hard for so many people because self-criticism is easy.
Yes.
Self-compassion, especially if we haven't been taught it, is a lot harder.
So, I mean, obviously, you and I both know how long it takes to train.
It does, yeah.
It's not like you wake up one day and think, oh, I think I'll just be a therapist. I mean,
Ta-da!
yeah, it takes years.
It does.
You've done a tremendous amount of training. You work at, I mean, if this is the right way, a very high level. You've done, so much. What made you walk away from your life in front of the camera and radio? And I know you still do that because that's also part of it to promote things and get everything out. But what made you change your career?
I think firstly on the time it takes to become part of the helping professions, and I include therapists and counselors. I'm a counselling psychologist, so we're all trying to do the same thing, which is to help people based on what we have available to us and help them navigate their lives. They're the expert in their lives. We're never the expert. We are there with them as we just sort of navigate that landscape together and see how it can be a bit more helpful to them. So I think it should take a long time.
Yes,
actually.
I absolutely
really
agree.
do.
Of course, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
Because you really need to understand yourself as well in it. And that's not an easy process.
No, it's very, very difficult.
Very hard.
There were times that I nearly was like, I can't do this. I just can't do this. But,
I know. It churns up a lot in us, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a really good article actually by, I think it's Marilyn Bennett, called What Brings You Here? It's not a new article, but it's worth reading for any therapists who are listening to this or counselors, is what took you to therapy or to training in the first place. And you really have to look at yourself, because you have to ask yourself, am I doing this because it's fulfilling a need in me? And if so, what is that need? And being really reflexive, being really conscious about what you are doing it for. So I began training. I trained as a trauma counsellor when I was within the BBC to help my colleagues who were trying to process difficult stuff on news stories.
Yes.
And then I did an MSc, I did a master's in psychology and science masters, and started that in 2011, 2012. I did that. Then I got cancer, and so I was a bit derailed from doing any further training. But I did EMDR. I started EMDR training, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which again takes quite a long time, but is very good with trauma and stuck emotions like depression that won't shift, traumatic experiences that won't shift. I started my professional doctorate in counselling psychology. I'm looking at my certificates. And again, it's funny, isn't it, how the self-critical voice goes, here you are, Sian, showing off, looking at your certificate, showing off. Don't be a show off. That voice from the past, it can creep up, can't it? So
Mm-hmm.
sort of 2018, 2019, no, 28, 2017. Anyway, whenever it was, I started a doctorate in counselling psychology. I started off in my placement years, I was at Maggie's Cancer Care Centre.
Mm.
Having had a cancer experience myself, I thought maybe I'll have some sort of understanding of a cancer experience because all
Mm.
cancer experiences are radically different. But as I didn't feel I knew much because I'd never sat in front of anyone before and been with them in their difficulty, I went to cancer first because it was a known. And we were taught sort of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and person-centered therapy, and psychodynamic therapy, and
Yeah.
systemic practice, and all these different ways of practicing, I guess, within the psychological construct, within therapy itself. So I did Maggie's Cancer Care. I worked in a psycho-oncology practice in Central London Hospital. I went into complex family trauma, working with families in Kent, and then worked with adolescents who were experiencing difficulties with anxiety, complex stress, suicidality. And then for the last 4 years, I've been in the NHS. But I left when I qualified in 2021 with my counselling doctorate. I thought I'd been on telly, I've been doing Channel 5 for a long time. And I thought there's no point having it if you don't use it. And you can't use it when you're working 4 days a week and not getting home until 8:30 at night.
Yes.
So I left broadcasting altogether at that point. And then after about a year, the BBC gave me a ring and said, we've got a radio program called Life Changing on Radio 4, which sounds up your street. Would you like to do it? And I said, yes. And then Radio 3, Unwind, came along, said, we've got a special daily program in the morning, which is about music and mood. Will you do that? And so half my week is the NHS and half my week is broadcasting. And it's a lovely mix. But you know, doing all this stuff, and I think doing different things. And I meet a lot of women in their 40s and 50s and 60s who are thinking, I'd like to do something else. But I don't know whether I'm going to be any good at it. And my feeling is none of us know whether we're going to be any good at it. And it doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the curiosity to try. And you get something out of that process. You really do. I didn't know at the time when I started that I was going to be here talking to you, working in the NHS. I didn't know it wasn't as clean as that. It was mucky and difficult. And like you, I had loads of times where I thought, you know, I'm trying to put in another assignment and I'm trying to work full time and I've got the kids and it felt too much.
Yes.
And I thought, I don't know whether I can do it. Am I going to be any good at it? You know, what if I'm rubbish? What if I think this is something I can do and then I'm sitting in front of someone and I can't help? I think also if you've been a problem solver all your life, or if you've been a parent, and a lot of that is about problem solving, as a therapist, it's not about solving problems. But when you start, you're like, right, you know, I've got something that can fix that. And of course, that's not helpful. The change comes from the person sitting in front of you. As I say, they're the expert. It doesn't really come from you. You're just with them finding stuff out. So I think not pushing for results and not thinking that it's all about you because it isn't is really important. But that takes a bit of getting used to, I think, when you're presented with a problem. Your perhaps instinctive reaction is, well, I can solve that. Why don't we try X, Y, and Z? Rather than sitting with it and hearing it and perhaps going, that sounds really tough. Let's have a think about where this came from or how this impacts your life.
Yes.
Or a thing that has coming more and more is, what did you have to do to survive? What was it you needed to do to survive?
Yes, so quite often people come up with all sorts of things. You know, one of them is I'm terrified of loving again, you know, because I've been hurt, I've been rejected, I've been used, I've been cheated on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always think it's very helpful to know, yes, that's painful. It's probably, it's building on scar tissue, I think, from probably deep wounds, so we won't go there now, from the past, but actually you're still here.
Mm-hmm.
You're here. We're here together.
Mm-hmm.
You're still alive, you're still on the planet. Because the fear of loving, it's such a terrible thing to have, because of course love is so important, to love people and be loved. It's so important.
But I can completely understand how that feeling of vulnerability
Yeah.
is intensely fearful. If
Yes.
you have been vulnerable in the past and hurt, that is a wound which does
Mm.
not often heal well. And you know yourself, when a wound doesn't heal well, it gets hard and the skin doesn't move.
Yeah, it's the scar tissue. It's the same. It's like the same as the dagger going in the same place. Really.
Yes. So, and you would understand then, and this is where anxiety comes in, where the anxious feelings are, I don't want to reveal myself again. Because if I reveal myself again, I'm going to get hurt again. I'm going to show, if I show my vulnerability, if I show who I am, I'll be rejected and hurt, and I never want to go back to that place again. So far better to be avoidant, perhaps, in your
Mm.
relationships, or to not go there in the first place,
Mm.
to not be involved, to not show who you are, to show up as someone different because you think that's who the other person wants you to be, because that's a protective mechanism, isn't it? We
Yeah.
build up this armor around us, this protective armor that goes, well, you're not going to get there. You won't get to me. You won't get to my art. I'm looking after it this time. But
Yes.
we need to show our vulnerability in relationships. But if we've been hurt in the past, that it's not easy. That does
No.
that does take time and a lot of understanding. And I use the word forgiveness again because I think we have to forgive our body and our brain for trying to keep us safe in this instance, for saying, oh, let's not go back there. And saying, well, thank you, but this is that I'd like to open up a little bit more. I'd like to show myself a little bit more. And maybe that will lead to rejection, but perhaps I've developed some coping mechanisms where it won't go so deep this time. It won't hurt as much this time if it does happen.
Yes, I
But it
like
may
that.
not, and then
That's so
something wonderful will
powerful.
come up.
Yes. When I know you've got to finish soon, but I also know that you went through breast cancer. That must have caused tremendous anxiety for you and the people around you.
Yeah. Do you know, it's very strange when you're presented with a cancer diagnosis because all of a sudden you're in a system and on a conveyor belt and in a team of medical experts
Mm.
who you place all your trust in because you don't know any differently. They're the experts. They know, in my case, they knew I had to have a double mastectomy and had to have it quite quickly. So I'm
Mm.
not sure the anxiety was around that process. I,
Mm.
I think the anxiety came in perhaps, or the emotional stuff came in later. And when I was working at Maggie's and actually in the psycho-oncology department of the hospital as well, we noticed a lot that when treatment ended for those with cancer, for those lucky enough for treatment to end,
Mm.
a lot of the stuff that they hadn't allowed themselves to feel came up.
Yeah.
And then they would blame themselves for that because it'd be, well, you're better now. Everybody tells you you're better now. Everybody tells you you're recovering or the cancer's gone or you're on a good hormone treatment or whatever it is. You shouldn't be feeling X, Y, and Z. And that's why I did some research into people with a cancer experience who had high levels of ruminative thinking. So the sort of repetitive thoughts that just go round and round and round with no answer.
Yes.
And feared self-compassion, so really didn't know how to be kind to themselves
Mm.
and had a very negative experience of themselves as someone living with cancer. And we did they did an 8-week mindfulness-based course,
Mm.
group mindfulness-based course, where they were taught how to use the breath, how to notice and name and talk about what was going on and share that with other people. And it was transformative. And at the end of the 8 weeks, their fears of self-compassion had gone right down. Their ruminative thinking had gone right down.
Mm.
Their feelings of self-kindness and kindness for others and being able to express what they're thinking and feeling, which was so hard, had gone right up. There was a great deal of, oh, I can't show this to my family because I don't want them to worry anymore.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I did not reach for the outstretched hands when I had cancer because I thought I could cope with it. I thought,
Mm.
well, this is just something I'll manage on my own. It'll be absolutely fine. I'll come out the other side and I'm with a good medical team and then the emotions come in and it's I need the community. I need a community around me. I need my friends. I need my family. I need to say what it's like here because otherwise it can be very lonely. So I
Yeah.
think the curiosity about what's going on with you, the connection with other people, and the compassion, learning to reach for it and to ask for it, but also learning how to show it to yourself. Those three things are important, whatever it is we're facing, whether we're facing a cancer experience, whether we're facing anxiety, whatever intense feelings or experiences are going around. Curiosity, connection, compassion. I think those things can be absolutely transformative to the way we live with difficult and challenging experiences.
Yes. That's so helpful.
Oh, thank you.
And
And
it's hard. I think it's hard to be,
yeah.
what I love about the book also, which is helpful, is at the end there's summaries of the chapters, so there's takeaways, so you
Mm,
can. There's a lot to take in,
it is, yeah.
but you can have the summaries. Think, oh yeah, I remember that bit. That
Yeah.
bit really spoke to me, and that bit's really helpful. I think you're right. I think people are not taught how to be compassionate to themselves.
No, because it feels, when I was doing the research, there were a lot of people who are saying, and that actually they will say it in clinical practice, oh, it's selfish or it's self-indulgent, or I was taught just to, and then fill in the blank,
Mm,
just to be quiet or just to keep you, whatever it is, just to pick yourself up and dust yourself down and start all over again. Well, so was I, but equally, you can do that in a way that says, pick yourself up, recognize actually this is tough. you know,
yes.
Thank your body for still being able to get back up into the fray and think, what can I do now to best protect myself, to live through it well and to live life well. And that might mean recognizing that particularly highly sensitive part of us, which needs the right soil and the right light and the right environment and a bit of love to
Mm,
help us thrive, just like the orchid you know show it, feed it well, give it light, change its environment if it's not thriving, and show it
mm,
love, and it will be amazing and it will bloom. And that's what we can do to ourselves.
yeah. Thank you so much.
That's
Luckily, I
been
think
a
I'm
pleasure.
more like a dandelion weed.
Well, you might be a tulip.
I
You might
might
be
be
a
a
mix
tulip. I might be a tulip.
of both, or you might just have learnt how to work your environment in so that it benefits you. I mean, I work a lot with people who experience workplace stress. And
mm,
it's, well, what can you do in a workplace if it
I
feels
know that's
toxic? How can you
so
tweak these
difficult.
bits?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's difficult, but it's not you can do it. All these things are achievable. All these things that we feel are healable. It's having somebody alongside you that goes, you know what, let's do this together.
Yeah.
Let's do this together because I've worked before with, or you've worked before with people who've been tried this or gone here, and different things will work for different people. So
Yeah.
let's see what works best for you.
So you're obviously in a career, if that's the right word, that you love. It's you're really, this is your calling, I imagine. It feels that way.
Oh, well, I don't know. It's interesting because I've always had a career I loved, and
Yeah.
I've never planned it. It's always been, I've never sort of written on the back of an envelope where I'm going to be in 5 years or 10 years or 20
Mm,
years or
mm.
30 years time. And 40 years after I started as a local radio reporter in Liverpool in 1986, if you'd asked me, where do you think you're going to be in 40 years? I mean, how on earth would you answer that question? But I don't think I'd say, I think I'd be working half the week in the NHS and half the week in radio. Things can take extraordinary turns. I think it's about not being frightened to not being frightened to listen to the whisper that goes, how about doing this? And you might not be very good at it, but it might just be fun. You might find something about yourself. You might find out something about yourself while you're doing it. And learning something new is humbling. You'll know, you went back to therapy. You started to be a therapist after a career in journalism. When you start something new, you go back to the bottom.
Yeah, you go back to the bottom.
Oh, my word, absolutely. I remember my supervisor saying to me when this was when I was doing my master's, when I came very close to failing an assignment, and he said to me, you may think of yourself as a success outside these walls, but inside these walls, you're a student, and here you might fail, and you must learn to take feedback. So,
I actually I mean, for the first time in my life, I failed an essay.
Did you?
Yes. Yeah, I did.
Well,
counter-transference.
I've never liked counter-transference.
No, it was completely mind-boggling by counter-transference. I get it, and then I kind of just didn't get it, and
that's the stuff that comes from you to me, and the stuff that comes from me to you. That's what.
Yeah, trying to express it, and I thought I'd done a great job on my essay. No, I failed it, and that was completely out of my comfort zone. But it was, she said, you failed the essay. And I was like, what? Failed? I never fail. And she was like, yeah, okay. But it's sort of, she was like, I know. It was very useful information for me to be, failure is all right, but you didn't get a grade, and you need to go back and look at it and redo it and do some more reading and do some more thinking and express, and it was really interesting.
Do I wonder whether there's something here about journalists and people who deal in fact, or as much fact as they can glean, in that when we present stuff, we've researched it and we know that this happens and this happens and then this happens and this happens, and there you go. And that's news. That's how news works, right? So, but when you're dealing with psychological concepts and people and the complexity of human life, it's open to interpretation, and therefore sometimes we'll get it wrong. And I'm sure I failed at one or two essays. I was just thinking of a particular. I was so sure that he had got his feedback wrong. I mean, of the arrogance of knocking on his door and saying, I'm not sure this is right. I'm just not sure this is right.
I think I have passed, actually.
I think actually you'll find, but it does teach you humility. And I tell you what, working in the NHS teaches you humility, because you're working with healthcare workers, and for many people it's a vocation.
Yes.
And the NHS is held up by remarkable people who turn up day after day. And working in healthcare, we know that people who work in healthcare are more likely to experience burnout. And still, through all the workplace stresses and the changes, all the things they have to experience, still they turn up. And that makes you think a little differently about life, I think, when you come from slightly rarefied broadcasting.
We're going to have to finish. So I'm going to hold up the book.
Thank you.
The Power of Anxiety, How to Ride the Worry Wave by Dr. Sian Williams. Get it from your local independent bookstore if you can, because we're very good, big fans of that on the podcast. If not, of course, you can get it from Amazon or the usual places. I think it's a brilliant book, and I think what you've said is absolutely right. Not everyone can afford therapy, private therapy. Lots of people on waiting lists.
Yeah.
This book is going to really, really help you if you have anxiety, anyone you know has anxiety, or you just want to read about some therapeutic concepts. Well, by that I don't mean, I'm like, ones you can use. In your day-to-day life, I think it's really helpful. There's a lot of stuff that's named in it. So thank you so much for writing it.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm really, really glad. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You sit writing something and you don't think of it going out into the big wide world, and then finally it does, and it's no longer part of you, really. It's in other people's hands, and they can do with it what they will, and hopefully they'll find stuff in it that will change their lives or help them at least ride the worry wave. That was the point. The John Kabat-Zinn quote, which is you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. The waves of anxiety are always going to be there, but we can learn to pick up a surfboard and ride them.
Yes, I like that. And do you want people to come to your website? Anywhere else you'd like them to find you?
Yes, they can come to my website. They can listen to extraordinary people facing difficult stuff on Life Changing on Radio 4 or every day Radio 3, 9 till 12, Radio 3 Unwind, where they can just sink into very relaxing, soothing, restorative music. So yeah, there's loads of different places. I'm going to be doing lots of book festivals as well.
Yeah.
So,
yes,
that'll be fun, where I can actually meet people and they can tell
people
me
can come and meet you. That will be on your website, so easy.
I will put that on my website.
Yeah, great. So thank you so much, and that's really kind of you to come on the podcast and so helpful.
Oh well, I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. Thank you.